Hi team, welcome back to our Introduction to Chinese History Anchor Fact series of printables and mini lessons. In this series, we are learning about some of the most important events that explain the long story of China, the most ancient of today's cultures, to reveal the explanation for why China is so important in the world today. In our last lesson, we looked at the story of Confucius, the most famous person in Chinese history, and the man who tried to educate the emperors so that they could be benevolent despots, men who tried to teach them to be fathers to the nation. The truth is, however, that benevolent despotism was never going to succeed all the time. You could sometimes get a good ruler who truly did his best to serve the people, such as Yu the Great, or perhaps Deng Xiaoping. But you were always going to get tyrants too. Rulers who would be corrupted by power and treat the people badly. For thousands of years of Chinese history, that's what we see as the reality. But before we move on to that story, it's time to talk about the most famous monument in China, the Great Wall of China, and the second most famous monument, the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, which includes the famous terracotta warriors. These were created around the same time, and they show us fascinating things about that earlier China. The Great Wall of China was begun by the Qin dynasty in a time when China was rebuilding after the collapse of the previous Zhou dynasty. The problem the Chinese had was that the people to the north, the Mongols as they're sometimes known, were great warriors, but not very civilized. To prevent them from coming down and invading China, the Chinese emperors had to find a way to protect their people and themselves. That, of course, was their job as benevolent despots. They began the first in a series of walls to stop the invaders. These walls were expanded over many centuries to create a whole set of protections against invasion, which, when they were fully connected together, became the Great Wall. Ancient cities in Europe did the same thing. They were always surrounded by walls. The Romans built a wall to protect their border with Scotland. As you may know, President Trump believes it is important to have a wall on the border with Mexico to stop people from entering the United States illegally. Probably the most famous wall of my generation was the Berlin Wall, built by the communists of Russia and Germany. But that one was different. I would suggest you look that one up. It's part of our printable series. And that wall was not about keeping people out. It was about the story of the Great Wall of China is connected to the story of the Terracotta Army because the same emperor, Qin Shi Huang, who was responsible for connecting the different walls into one Great Wall, was buried in a giant complex that was discovered in modern times, where his body is protected by a giant army. The Terracotta Army is an amazing display of art and power. The entire complex is the size of a city, and parts of it have still not been uncovered. But the parts that have are amazing. Every warrior is different. The artists who made these sculptures created them very lifelike, with all kinds of facial expressions. There are so many, including other figures such as horses and chariots. It's not surprising that many people who visit China come to see this amazing sight, including American presidents. Unfortunately, the Terracotta Army is mainly a symbol of power, the power of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. It's a tomb, like the pyramids of Egypt. It's a dedication to a powerful ruler. But it did not actually help the people have better lives. So, like most powerful rulers who did things for themselves, like build huge tombs, Qin Shi Huang had trouble controlling his people. The Qin dynasty that he had started did not last long. It was replaced by the benevolent despots of the Han dynasty, which is probably the most famous in Chinese history. In fact, the Chinese people generally refer to themselves as the Han Chinese people. We'll explore this replacement of dynasties one after another for 4,000 years in our next lesson. See you then.